All right, everybody. Good Friday evening. Meteorologist Alex Carter with you here for another edition of Weather Aware Live. Obviously covering all the wintry weather that's moving into the CSRA this weekend. And we do have a potential ice storm on our hands. So again, I don't want you to get caught up in necessarily the word ice storm. I want you to get caught up more so in the totals and the particular impacts for your area, which is where we're going with this. So I'm going to let everybody filter in. Hope you all have had a nice week. Obviously, we've been keeping a check of the forecast over the past several days. We've been monitoring it nonstop here, and we've been seeing this in the binoculars view just after Sunday snow, and now we're getting closer and closer to the day of the event. I do want to emphasize, though, while everybody's filtering in, tomorrow, if you're in Lincolnton, Edgefield, McCormick, Washington, the places that we expect the highest impact in our area, these are the spots where we could also see a potential for, making those preps. Again, Saturday, I think, looks good to go for tomorrow morning and tomorrow at lunchtime. And I'm going to go. All right, there we go. Just fixing a couple audio things. So everybody's filtering in. Thank you for joining us tonight. And again, if you have any if you have any questions about the forecast, make sure to let us know, and we'll do our best to answer those here on Weather Aware Live. So let's go ahead and get into some things here. I'm going to go ahead and go to what we're expecting. This is the ice storm warning, and the ice storm warning goes for anywhere along the Augusta Metro, in Richmond, Columbia, Aiken counties, McDuffie and Warren counties, and points to the north. And this is where we're expecting the highest impacts from this winter storm. Now, again, the upstate is going to get the worst of this. We're talking Greenville. We're talking North Georgia. These spots are going to get potentially up to 3/4 of an inch of ice. Now, that is significant. Near Charlotte, North Carolina, could see a very dangerous winter storm up in those directions. For us, my gut says this is not 2014 for our area, but we can still see disruptive impacts that could briefly make us lose power and have some travel issues Sunday into Monday. So those are the main talking points for especially areas along and north of I-20. Let's also show you the winter weather advisory. Don't want this to get lost in the mix as well. This includes Burke County, Jenkins and Screven counties in Georgia, and it also includes Barnwell, Bamberg, and Allendale counties in South Carolina. Think of this winter weather advisory more as a precautionary measure, saying that we could see some very low ice accumulations, but the impacts in these areas, I'm very confident, is going to be overall insignificant from this storm. But still, a glaze of ice of 1/10 of an inch, we'll still get some slick spots. So Sunday morning, I think some travel issues are still possible, but it'll be more spotty, and it won't be as widespread as what we're expecting from the Augusta Metro points to the north. Now, we also have a winter storm watch in just 2 counties, Jefferson and Glasscock counties. Again, these areas south of I-20, we're not expecting nearly as many impacts as what we're expecting along and north of it. So that's the bottom line. That's the big focal point of this forecast. And again, we're going to answer any questions that you have through tonight. Good to see you as well, Amy. Thanks for commenting. And any more of those questions, again, y'all filter them in. More than happy to answer those, and hopefully we can get you what you need as we head into the weekend forecast. So let's go ahead and get into it. Again, we just went over the advisories. Here's the impacts that we're expecting. I'm going to take myself off so you can see this. Again, anywhere from Louisville, Waynesboro, Barnwell, Bamberg counties, and south. That includes Swainsboro, Emmanuel County, Millen, Jenkins County, Allendale, Allendale County, Screven, and Sylvania. And these are the spots that I think we're going to see little to no impact from this particular storm. Again, this looks to be along and north of I-20 for the most substantial impacts. For the Augusta Metro, I don't think we're going to see catastrophic impacts. I just can't stand it when people say it's going to be 2014 all over again. That is just something that you can't take lightly. You can't take those words lightly because that was a historic storm. And actually, I've seen a few meteorologists who have been in the market before comment that 2014 was our benchmark for worst severe storm that we've ever had around here until Helene. And so 2014 has a special meaning, and we don't want to dilute that at all. And again, I do think we will see some disruptive weather this weekend. I don't think we see catastrophic impacts, but the areas that we could really see the disruptions, the ones that I really am concerned about the most are going to be Washington, Lincolnton, McCormick, Edgefield, up near Appling, up near Crawfordville. And these are all spots where we could see the most significant impacts. Once you get to Augusta, Aiken, Thompson, Evans, North Augusta, Grovetown, Martinez, these are all areas where I do think ice accumulations will form. I do think the roads get slick starting overnight Saturday and early Sunday morning, and we could see some spotty power outages across the Augusta Metro. But the higher or the further north you go of I-20, the worse the impacts will be with this system. That's the bottom line here. And that's the big thing to drive home and get across. Now, when it comes to the potential ice accumulations, this is the latest update as of this afternoon when we were looking at the latest data. The further south of Louisville, Waynesboro, and Barnwell you go, the higher chance that you see less than 1/10 of an inch of ice. That's good news for some of our counties. The Augusta Metro, I think, is going to see anywhere from 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of ice. Worst case scenario, 1/4 of an inch. Think of these totals this way. And as I go through these, you'll be able to kind of decipher what I'm talking about here. Think of the totals on the left-hand side as the more realistic totals for our area. This is more or less what we're expecting right here. However, we've been talking about this for quite a while, and I do want to emphasize it. This cannot be understated. We do not want to underestimate that cold air wedge. That cold air wedge still has a grip on the forecast because, again, forecast data tends to poorly estimate the power of the wedge, and sometimes that wedge can lock things in for a longer period of time. Remember the thought process with this, right? The longer we see sub-freezing temperatures, the longer we see freezing rain, which means the higher the totals, which means the higher the impacts. And if that wedge does lock in, and we see freezing temperatures for a long time, that can mean we see a more significant setup that is capable of producing the totals that you see here, which is anywhere from, again, 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice. So always want you to keep your guard up, but we don't want to scare you and we don't want to overhype it. Again, we just want you to get the most accurate look at the different scenarios that we could see. And again, we are highly confident that areas along I-20, which includes the Augusta Metro, and points north, we'll see the most impacts from this system. And the further north you go, the worse it gets. So again, the left side of those totals is the more realistic end. The right side is if the cold air wedge doesn't break, and we could see anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice, which causes those major disruptions. And again, if you're wondering, okay, well, what's the big deal about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice? Here is the impacts that we see based on those levels. Lots of branches will fall if we see 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice north of I-20. Lots of those bigger branches on these trees. The roads will be slick, and that's going to lead to travel problems, and those travel problems will linger into Monday morning. Scattered power outages are more likely whenever you see 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch of ice. And once you get to that 1/2 an inch threshold, that's when the significant impacts really start to pile up. When it comes to 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, you're still going to see the ice collect on the trees, and I think a lot of us will see that. You're going to see the ice sticking to the trees. You'll see that light glaze over them. The bridges and the roads will have slick spots. We'll also see some slick roads up to 1/4 of an inch. But the power outages, that's more of an isolated type of deal when you've only seen 1/10 to 1/4. Power outages become more widespread once you see 1/4 of an inch and above. So if you're wondering, okay, well, I know what totals I'm expecting in my area, but what does that mean when it comes to the impacts? That's what we're looking at here. And so I hope that answers some questions. Michael Bright, hello from Swainsboro, Georgia. Thankfully, you look to be getting some of the least of this, Michael, which is a good thing. Michelle, I don't think Barnwell can move into the high impact zone, which you see on our map here in the red. I don't think Barnwell can move into that. I think that is something that's mainly along and north of I-20 is where that's going to be designated for. So I hope that relieves some of your storm anxiety, if you will. Let's see. Evans area, I think, could see a good coating of ice, Mackenzie, to answer your question. I do think that if you're anywhere along and north of I-20, 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch could cause some brief problems. If we see 1/4 of an inch of ice, that could cause a lot more problems. Richard and Beach Island, and that's thank you for asking this in Beach Island, Richard, because areas like Hepzibah, areas like Deering, Harlem, you're just south of I-20. You're just south of that line. So you're thinking, well, if I'm on the fringe, well, maybe does that change things? And the answer is I think you're going to see closer to 1/10 of an inch of ice if you're in Beach Island, Richard. I think it's going to be closer to 1/10 of an inch. And that's going to be enough to put a glaze on the trees, some black ice on the road, some of those travel problems. But again, I think the worst of this is going to be north of the interstate. So if you're closer to, say, Appling, say you're in Clarks Hill Lake, say you're in the Sweetwater community, north of along Exit 5 there, moving up towards Edgefield Highway, I think these are the spots that could see the potentially higher end impacts in that scenario. Let's see. Crystal, to answer your question, I think Appling is in the moderate impacts, but you're right on that borderline. It's a very we've been talking about this a lot. The margins with this storm are going to be razor thin, and that's why we have a matter of miles between what could be just slight impacts and a lot. And again, the freezing rain accumulations and minor sleet accumulations that could be possible, that's enough to cause some trouble, including the travel issues and, of course, the power outages. I think we're going to see spotty outages, but along Highway 378, Washington, Lincolnton, McCormick, up towards Pleasant Lane and Edgefield County, those are the spots that could see some longer-lived power outages, along with some down trees and some power lines that lead to not just travel issues, but, again, longer duration outages as well. April, I like that question. April, so we met, that was a couple weeks ago. Thanks for running in and saying hey, by the way. That was at the grocery store. The best snacks we need to plan for. I don't know what y'all's favorite winter storm snacks are. I tend to think I like Oreos a lot. I like ham roll, if y'all know what that is. Got a lot of mayo in it. Let's see what else. Taco soup, that's a good one for this type of weather. So maybe that helps you out, April. Let's see. Mackenzie and Aiken. You're asking about Aiken's weather. Again, I think Aiken's going to be in that line of about 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch of ice. And worst case scenario, you get 1/4 of an inch in Aiken. The most realistic scenario is trending towards more just a glaze of ice that will cause some travel issues, slick roads on Sunday morning. And those slick roadways could continue as we head into Sunday afternoon. But we're about to show y'all a caveat to this forecast that's going to play a role. Scott, you might not be wrong on that. I can't wait to see the trends from your area. Make sure to keep me posted on what you're seeing in real time as this happens, because we always talk about the Harlem area. That's kind of the abyss, as you're referring to there. That's pretty good. Mackenzie, I would say the percentage of the Evans area becoming more of a high impact zone, I would say that's more about 20 to 25%. So maybe a little too close for comfort, but still the odds are seeing about closer to 2/10 of an inch of ice in your area. That's still enough to cause problems, by the way. Lorray, thank you for that. Good evening to you. And you're asking about Avra and Stapleton. Avra and Stapleton, I think, could see about 1/10 of an inch of ice, just a glaze. And then once we get further south into Jefferson County, it gets even less than that. But in your particular area, right on the border of Glasscock and Jefferson County, I do think you could see about 1/10 of an inch of ice, some black ice possible on Monday, but I think a lot of that would start to melt on Sunday afternoon, which is a big piece to the forecast that we are about to actually get into. So let's go ahead and show you this, and I'm going to go ahead and bring in this graphic because I think it's a good illustration of just how razor thin our margins are in our area. Let's go ahead and drag that over. So let's go into the freezing rain models, and some of these are actually performing really well because we're starting to get a good idea of kind of what shakes out and transpires. Euro in the GFS, what picture does that paint, right? Showing you along and north of I-20 for the highest chance of that coverage. And if I take you to a more high-resolution model than that, it's going to show you the same thing. The trends are in our favor if you're south of I-20, not so much north of it. This is our in-house model and our RAP model. That's the Rapid Refresh model. Both of those are truly in agreement for the most part. Now, the totals are different, but the trend is overall the same. The RAP model really demonstrates what I think could happen here. which is we see best case scenario happen for a lot of places, and then north of I-20, and you look at Thompson, Columbia County, Crawfordville, Washington, Edgefield, McCormick. These are spots that could see up to a quarter of an inch, slightly more than that, and those are where the heaviest impacts will be felt with this system. So again, the trends are continuing to be in the right direction. The forecast, not going to change much from where we're at right now. But let's show you this, because we're going to show you the timeline for the winter weather. And these are the high temperatures on Sunday. Look at that. It is going to be a game of miles, y'all, between what could be near 60-degree temperatures in Swainsboro Sunday and some 30s and 40s along and north of I-20. But look at all this. This is at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, mind you. All those temperatures are above freezing. So whenever we start to get above freezing, we're going to melt. So whatever does accumulate Saturday night into Sunday morning, this is likely going to start melting once temperatures get above freezing closer to Saturday or Sunday afternoon and early Sunday evening. That's the good news to the forecast here. We're expecting a brief melting period. And again, the winter weather timeline will show you just that, which I'm going to get off the screen here. Saturday evening's when this all starts. Sunday morning, that's the brunt of the accumulations. Temperatures below freezing in both of those windows, right? So anything that falls will stick starting around 7 o'clock Saturday through about, say, lunchtime on Sunday. But look at Sunday afternoon. There's the mixed bag we were talking about. And there's all that rain that's trying to move in. Places along and north of I-20 have the highest chance of seeing sub-freezing temperatures all day. This is where the forecast gets dicey, right? Because a lot of the models are showing a warming trend. And hopefully this will be the case. Hopefully we do get those temperatures down into the 40s. But again, you never underestimate. You always got to proceed with caution with the cold air wedge. The wedge, if it holds serve and it's stronger, can keep temperatures well below what the models expect. We have seen this, I can't tell you how many times in my little over 3 years here in the CSRA has this happened. We'll expect 60s, we'll end up in the low 50s. The wedge can be very strong. That's why when you see our snow total graphic, that we want to give you that heads up in the event of the wedge sticking. If the wedge were to be strong and it locked us into freezing temperatures, we could see up to a half an inch of ice in the Augusta Metro. We could see a half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of ice north of Highway 378. Is that likely? No. The answer is no on that. However, that's the power of the wedge, and that's where we have to make sure you're up to date and making sure you're just preparing for a potential worst-case scenario just in case of the event of winter weather. So just wanted to run you through that before we go into the Futurecast model here, and then we're going to answer some questions the rest of the time. So this is tomorrow, and I want to emphasize it. We're going to go through the timeline here. Tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon, I'm not anticipating any problems. I don't want you to think that you have to be locked in your house starting tonight, running all the way through Tuesday. That's just not the case. We have a very short window here where I think we're going to see the worst of the weather. And then if we melt on Sunday afternoon, all we got to deal with is some lingering black ice on Monday. And then the cold temperatures are going to last all in next week. They're going to last all in next week. We might see 7 to 10 straight days in parts of our area that do not hit 50 or above. Kid you not. That is a realistic scenario starting tomorrow. Many spots of the CSRA could see sub-50-degree temperatures for 7 to 10 straight days. That is rare in the CSRA. But let's dive into the Futurecast here. So tomorrow morning and around lunch, I don't think we see a whole lot. And we're not going to see a whole lot until the rain-sleet changeover starts, and that's really going to begin to pick up once we get to Saturday evening. I think anywhere from 5 to 7 is when that could start up as early as then. The brunt of this begins to move in overnight. So Saturday evening, even if you start to see a few freezing rain pellets beginning to fall, the accumulations really don't pile up until the overnight hours Saturday and through early Sunday morning. This is about 4 in the morning on Saturday or Sunday. And look at the widespread coverage. Freezing rain, very likely as those temperatures dip down below freezing, and that's when the accumulations begin to happen. We'll see a lot of this forming and, up until about, say, 8 to 10 o'clock. And then by the late morning, we'll likely get a breather. And that breather, this is where the key part of the forecast, this is the uncertainty in the forecast. This is the part where we're prepping you for the worst case scenario, but hoping that that's going to be it. I think the main event happens Saturday night through Sunday morning. The only caveat that we have is Sunday afternoon. If that wedge is strong, then temperatures are going to be very hard-pressed to warm up. Now, this is your futurecast showing you 50s in Swainsboro Sunday afternoon, upper 30s in Augusta, and some low 40s south of I-20. Again, it's going to be a fine line, and if the wedge is strong, these temperatures will not be what they are on this futurecast. They'll actually be cooler than that. If the if the cold air wedge retreats to the north, then we could see a warm-up, which would allow for a brief melting period in the afternoon, which is what we're touching on here. Notice all these temperatures starting around noon and working their way into about, say, 5 o'clock, they're all above freezing. And then the rain, if it's a cold rain, could help melt just a little bit of this away. It's not going to be a big impact. And then all that cold rain continues anywhere from, say, 5 o'clock Sunday to 9 o'clock on Sunday evening. This is all going to clear out. And again, temperatures will be above freezing for a pretty good chunk of time if that solution holds true Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, and then they'll fall to near freezing Monday morning. Black ice, a concern Monday. I don't think if we start to melt Sunday afternoon, black ice will not nearly be as much of an issue as what it would be if we had the wedge stay in place all day. So that's what I wanted to give you before we get into the Q&A here. And Tuesday morning is going to be very cold. Tuesday morning is going to be a freezer. Look at that, 17 to 18 degree lows. We were talking pipe bursting cold. I want to make sure that you're aware of that because you need to protect those pipes, especially with wind chill values down into the 13, 14, 15 degree range. Okay, so we're going to get back to Q&A time here. And if you have any questions, feel free to answer those, looking at those. First question is about the wedge. I'm going to go ahead and answer that. Thank you, Evan. Evan asked, could the low and the wedge push further east and we get more rain? So the axis of this wedge, Evan, I think, the big key to this is if the low is strong, then it's going to push the wedge further north. And if it's a stronger low. The model guidance today is showing a stronger low. Yesterday, it was showing a weaker low. And it could easily change back again by tomorrow. That low hasn't formed yet. That is the so hard part about this forecast. So to answer your question, likely the low is going to be right around that time frame. I think we're going to start to see the wedge breaking is in the afternoon. And I think areas south of I-20 definitely get above freezing. Still TBD on north of I-20 with that, okay? So I think a big rain event is unlikely. I think the most rain that we will see is going to be Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. I'm confident that most of that turns into a cold rain. I still think north of I-20 that could be changing over into a freezing rain for us. Simon, interesting question. Love this because, there's a big difference in the forecast depending on where you're at in Georgia and South Carolina. Areas like Albany, Valdosta, Savannah could see thunderstorms on Sunday. For us, I think we're just going to get a cold rain as that line moves in, but we will not see thunder with the freezing rain, and we're not going to see thunder or snow or anything like that. It just doesn't seem like that's likely. Let's see. Tiffany, good question. This forecast is all about hunches. And tomorrow it's going to be all about real-time data because we'll get to see the wedge trends and see if that's actually going to be the case because we've been talking about it all week. It's one thing to predict it. It's one thing to see it in real time, which is what we'll get to do on Saturday. So I think the wedge is going to hold on for a good chunk of time. I think that we'll stay right now. I think somewhere in the middle is true. I think that we could stay primarily in the 30s north of I-20 on Sunday, and then we'll be in the low to mid-40s from the Augusta Metro and points south. The further south you go, the warmer it gets. So 30s in our northern counties, 50s in our southern counties. So I do think the wedge is going to be pesky, and I do think it's going to try to hold on, but I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's going to give a little bit, but it's not going to budge as much as your in-house model is suggesting right now. Jesse, Blythe, Georgia, thanks for the question. I think Blythe, Georgia sees anywhere from 1/10 to 2/10 of ice accumulation, and you're going to see some slick roads Sunday morning, and then we'll see a melting period briefly Sunday afternoon. Still going to deal with some black ice on Monday. I think the city of Aiken, Susie, thanks for that question. I think the city of Aiken does see a decent amount of ice accumulation. I think that's very possible. I think anywhere from 1/10 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch is possible in your area. Patricia, Appling and Lincolnton. These are the higher impact zones, Patricia. So if you live in these areas, again, prep for power to potentially be out for 2 to 3 days. And on top of that, travel issues could linger into Monday morning. Sunday is going to be a day where you really don't want to get out on the roads if you're in these areas. Let's see. I've gotten 2 questions in a row now. Well, let me answer this one first. Laney, do you think it'll change slightly by tomorrow? A tweak or two is possible. We pretty much locked this in where it's at. I'm very confident in this forecast, and I don't think it's going to budge too much. We'll let you know if it does, of course, but I don't foresee that happening. So a few tweaks north and south, still possible, but the overall trend and idea is going to be the same here. Christian and Amy, can we talk about next weekend? Here we go. Next weekend, again, we're seeing it in the model guidance. There's a Gulf low, and remember how we just talked about it a moment ago. Temperature is going to be below 50 degrees in many spots of the CSRA for 7 to 10 days in a row. The Arctic air is in place, and there's going to be a Gulf low next weekend. What could that bring? We talk about this all the time. That's the setup you want for winter weather in the CSRA. So next weekend, again, we're going to get to that in due time, and we'll really start talking about that early next week once we get past this event. But next week, winter weather potential, next weekend, it's possible. It is possible. I will put it that way. I'm not going to just deny it here. So just keep that in mind. And let's see. Monitoring your questions here as well. Again, I'm going to swap over to the Fox page real quick and just going back and forth so I make sure to get all of your questions for tonight. Let's see. Mantra, good evening. How will Hepzibah fare? Hepzibah will more than likely see about 1/10 of an inch of ice, and it's going to be just a light glaze. You'll see it on the trees. There's going to be slick roads as early as Sunday morning and continuing into Monday morning, but I think Sunday afternoon does bring a brief melting period, to answer your question. Jason, thank you for that question. I do want to emphasize this. I'm not guaranteeing power outages for the Augusta Metro. Far from it. It's possible. If we see that higher threshold of 1/4 of an inch of ice, that's when we could see spotty outages. If we even see 2/10 of an inch of ice, spotty outages are possible. So Augusta, again, I'm not expecting widespread outages. I don't think this is going to be a long-duration power outage event, very similar to 2014 or Hurricane Helene for most of us. This could be a long-duration power outage event, however, I will say, for Washington, Lincolnton, McCormick, Edgefield, Plum Branch, Johnston, Trenton, up near Saluda County, Lincolnton, Clarksville Lake, Crawfordville, Tignall, Rail, Appling even. I think those areas could see a pretty significant icing event. Not most of the CSRA, however. Along and north of I-20 is where we got to really pay close attention to those impacts. Peter, good question. Some Saluda County viewers here, and for Saluda County, this is where we really got to watch out. I think you could see some ice accumulations up to 1/2 an inch there. That's enough to disrupt the power grid. That's enough to disrupt travel for a couple of days, and power outages could last 2 to 3 days if you get up to 1/2 an inch of ice. So hopefully that helps you there. Let's see. The Belvedere area. I think at the ceiling for the Belvedere area, I think, Amy, we could see 1/4 of an inch of ice in the worst case scenario if the wedge locks in. If the wedge locks in, 1/4 of an inch. If it doesn't lock in, 1 to 2/10 of an inch. Some slick roads starting Sunday morning, and then we could see a brief melting period Sunday afternoon. James, yeah, I'm with you there 100%. Fingers crossed this continues to push northward. We've seen a northward trend from the start of this week. The start of this week, you see the broad trends. You see the broad pattern, which was more or less a widespread ice storm and snowstorm for parts of the deep south. But the little features don't get ironed out until later in the week, such as the low that's trying to push the warm air northward, and the cold air wedge that's trying to fight the low. Those two features, those are microscopic features that get figured out later in the week and how they're going to interact with each other. And that's where this forecast, the rubber meets the road, and it's a very tricky forecast. It'll make you want to pull your hair out. I promise you that. I'm going to have some grays by the time we get done with January based on what could be coming our way next weekend. Again, not trying to stir up fuss or fight about that. That's just a trend we're watching. That's all. But again, those are the kind of things that we're watching about in the forecast. Raymond Fitzgerald, right now I'm especially glad I live in Florida. I used to work in Florida for a brief time, so getting a few Florida viewers in here. Raymond, enjoy that warm weather, my friend. And, just to touch on something more lighthearted for a second, look at this. This is the differential between Charlotte and Jacksonville. Look at that. This is on Sunday, by the way. You see that wedge? This is what we're talking about. It is such a fine line between ice storm and spring paradise down in South Georgia, where severe thunderstorms could be possible. Waycross at 76, Jacksonville at 80, right up I-95 into North Carolina, and you get in the 30s. It's a tough forecast. It's a game of margins. That's all there is to it. So that's what we are. That's what you have to contend with these winter weather forecasts. Justin Woodard, thank you for that comment. Hope your Pats get the win, man. Justin says, I hope my apartment complex doesn't lose power. I got to watch my Patriots. Also of note, I do want to mention, other than the AFC, we have the NFC Championship game on Fox, and that's going to be airing on Fox 54 on Sunday. So as we're covering this winter storm, there's also going to be the NFC Championship game if you're interested in that. As you're locked in and maybe just looking to stay cooped up for a couple days, cabin fever, maybe that makes it a little bit better. Let's see. Oh, of course, Raymond, I can give a Go Gators. Absolutely, all day. All right, Cynthia, thank you for this question. What are the odds of our flight from Columbia to Atlanta to New Orleans, the connector, on Monday afternoon actually happening? That's a good question. I still think you have a decent shot at that happening. However, airports proceeding with an abundance of caution, that could be the trick there. I do think conditions on runways will be improved by Monday afternoon, even in Columbia, but that's a dicey one there. I wouldn't bank on it by any means. So just keep asking away because I think once we get closer to time, we'll be able to more confidently ask that question. It depends on how the ice performs. And if it performs up to a quarter of an inch in Columbia, I think Monday afternoon is the earliest that they would be starting back flights. So that's going to be the tough part of that forecast. You're kind of right on the fringe there. So a few more questions here. And again, there we go. And then we'll go ahead and show you kind of what's ahead in the forecast and give you one last look at these totals and the impacts you can expect. So Dylan Pope, thank you for this question. When does it start? Like Saturday morning around 3 a.m. or Saturday night around 10 p.m., the freeze part. So Dylan, Sunday morning. I got you. My bad. So Dylan, I think, the best way to describe this is, tomorrow is good. I don't think we see travel issues tomorrow until we get to past like 7, 8 o'clock tomorrow night. So Saturday's looking good. The freezing rain's going to start Saturday night, and Sunday morning, freezing conditions will already be in place Sunday morning. So we are expecting travel problems beginning overnight Saturday into Sunday morning, and some of that could linger through Monday morning. So hope that answers your question there. Let's see. That's a good one. Some of these comments, I tell you what, get you a good laugh in with these. Okay, so again, I'm going to go ahead and show you the impacts and get myself off the screen here for just a moment. And there you go. So the further north of I-20 you are, the more impacts you'll see. About a quarter of an inch to a half an inch of ice is possible anywhere from, let's say, Ridge Spring, Aiken, Augusta, Evans, Appling, Martinez, Thompson, and points north. A quarter of an inch of ice is the ceiling for the Augusta Metro. And that's enough to, again, cause travel problems and power outages from Saturday overnight through early Monday morning. The further south of I-20 you go, the less the impacts that we will see. Let's go to the impacts themselves. What can you expect in your area? Spotty power outages, slick roads. That's possible in the Augusta Metro. Higher impacts are possible, such as long-term power outages and long-term travel issues, and some downed trees in areas like Washington, Lincolnton, McCormick, Edgefield, Saluda counties, and even far northern Aiken County, north of Interstate 20. So that's where we'll be watching for the more significant impacts. And so, while we have you here, one last note. If the power goes out, if it does, far from a guarantee, but if it does in your location, this is where to watch us. We're going to be here on live stream on Facebook, on YouTube. We're also live streaming right now on our website. That's WFXG.com. So if you're wanting to tune in for some live coverage there, you can also tune in. And the live stream, we're doing that from the digital studio now. That's going to be available whenever you need it on top of Facebook and YouTube live streams. So make sure to join us there in the event that you lose power. You can also find us there anytime in general, power or not. And you can also find us on Fox 54 News on actual TV as well. We'll be cutting in. And, of course, we want to hammer home. We want to let you know that Fox 54 is your home for weather coverage. We hope that you continue to check back here for frequent updates. Thank you guys so much for your trust. Again, we try not to scare. We just want you to be prepared in the event of a worst-case scenario, and hopefully we give you the most realistic scenario for what's going to happen as well. That's how we like to do it. It's always good to prepare for something a level above what you might expect, especially in this area where our DMA, our television market, 120 miles long. 120. That is a long ways. So you can get a lot of different impacts from one end to the other, from Mount Carmel in northern McCormick County all the way down to Oak Park and George L. Smith State Park in Emmanuel County. And, these areas are drastically different microclimates. They get drastically different results sometimes. This is a forecast where everything differs. You can get it right here on Fox 54, so we don't want to scare anybody, just want to keep you informed. We have more updates coming up tonight on Fox 54 News at 10 and 11, so we hope you join us there. And again, thanks for trusting our weather coverage tonight. We'll have more updates on television, on our newscast, and of course, we'll be live streaming this coverage as the winter storm begins to settle in tomorrow. Stay safe, stay informed. Hope you have a great Friday evening.